think about it, like, Dak, your first two elections you could vote in or presidential elections would be Hillary and Trump, and then Trump and Biden.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're like, when are you gonna stop with the lesser of two evils is the general like consensus of both those elections, and it's like, when is it gonna stop, and when can we go back to selecting candidates just because like of policy or just like,
I don't think it'll ever go back.
you don't think?
I don't think so, because as long as we keep treating human rights as if they're policy issues, we're always going to have emotional, especially after this year, because the more extreme one side is, the more extreme the other side is going to get. We see a flip-flop throughout history between Republican and Democratic like administrations, and I think until we figure out what we're going to do with human rights and stop making them a policy issue and stop bringing in religion and bringing in like all our personal biases, I don't see it ever being like, you know, the boring politics we remember from when we're like 5.
Right, and especially like looking past like to 2024, if Trump runs again or if it's not Trump, like how will the Republican Party go about running another candidate? Will they still use Trump's messaging but just not have Donald Trump be a figurehead? Because like his strategy worked. Like whether you hate him or you love him, his strategy to pull voters worked. Like you can run on populism in the United States, you can appeal to people that don't usually vote, you can even swing voters because of populism, because of being an iconic or charismatic figure. And so it's going to be interesting to see in 2024 if they don't run with him or even past that, just how they return, because before they would run on politicians like Mitt Romney,
right,
and like respectable, like
John McCain.
Yeah, like respectable human beings, where the only differences they would really have would be on policy implications.
Yeah.
Whereas like with Donald Trump coming out with more far righter ideals and this populism and just the way he carries himself, I feel like that's going to have a long-term effect, and I think that it might lead to like a realignment potentially of ideals, because you have like great support for Medicare for all or for more progressive policies, because you have that, but no party has really like hard committed to either of those. You've had the Democratic Party, which is like flirted with and is going to come to those progressive policies eventually, but if the Republicans go ahead and do a drastic swing and swoop in and try to appeal to more progressive policies, then that could completely change and flip voters and cause a realignment.
It'd be interesting, like, to see the Republicans go for more progressive policies, because I feel like with Trump it set them back, obviously, like you say, the Make America Great Again, and it aligns more with like Reagan and like the
traditionalism. Yeah,
so it's like setting them back. So it's like, what would that flip-flop look like? And now you're doing the complete other 180. Like, you know, how would they even
and
do that?
especially for a party where, like, if it weren't for Justice Roberts on the Supreme Court, the Republican Party would have been hard against like trans rights in a Supreme Court case decision over the summer. Like with that policy implication, and with that, like, that would have had to become the Republican Party's stance on trans and non-binary rights, is you are not a human, which would have obviously been very indefensible from like a human rights standpoint, and from like a national or from a worldwide standpoint, that would have been a source of like great criticism for them. But because of that, they're still like teetering on the edge, where they have like some politicians that are far right that don't necessarily believe in abortion rights or trans rights or anything like that. But they also have politicians who came out over the summer, and whether it be performative or not, that were marching at Black Lives Matter, that were like embracing more of these progressive ideals or progressive sayings or anything like that, trying to appeal to that base. And now you have people that might be looking at Republicans, whether they're educated or not about politics, that are like, they're not so bad, like they want the same things I want, we just differ on how to get there policy wise.
I was just thinking, like, back to your point on like social media and like everything that we've said since then, like, I think we also have to be careful with social media, because it has a lot of benefits of engaging more people and providing access and a voice to them, but we have to be like aware that social media is often weaponized at this point and can create a movement overnight, even if that movement isn't based in any kind of factual, like there's no facts. So I think we do have to be careful about that and be wary about the implications of what social media can like hold for us. But
and like with social media, like the kind of people it can elevate, not so much just with movements, but like you see the rise of like far right political pundits, far left political pundits that, like, whether or not they be correct in their saying, they have a massive audience and a massive influence. So like when you have people like we were discussing earlier, like Alex Jones, that like are conspiracy theorists that a lot of times spread misinformation.
Right.
Like the amount of people that believe Obama wasn't born in the United States and conspiracy theories such as that, like that's all a product of social media. Like, yeah, it was reported on Fox News, but like a lot of those things also will start on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and just gain attention.
And it's interesting because like obviously we can blame social media or like, but it's obviously up to the user. And it'd be interesting to look at those pundits that are far left or right and like their audience and like let's look at the age, because obviously I think before we're the first generation to even hear the term media literacy. And even our generation isn't that media literate, like, so I think that will be a big thing, is like maybe pushing that idea more of maybe there's sources there, but like let's actually find what's true. And with like newspapers and small local journalism dying, like social media might be kind of the only thing you have to get local information or just anything. So it's like weaving your way through figuring out like what will be effective and what will be harmful.
And then with that, not even just like on an individual level trying to figure that out, it's gonna come to a point eventually where like social media literacy is gonna have to be taught in schools. Because it's gonna be, when you're giving kids smartphones at like the ages of like 7, 8, whatever, they're gonna have access to that and they're going to be navigating a really potentially harmful social plane where they're going to be exposed to a bunch of things that they've never seen before or have no idea about. So like that's going to become a whole new element of how are you going to teach those kids how to properly use that? How are you going to tell them how are you going to explain to them that CNN and Fox News are both biased sources? And then also deal with pushback from parents who will defend those news sources for as long as they can and believe that they're unbiased. Because a lot of people don't want to come to terms with that, and then if you tell their kids that their news sources that they're watching might not be fully truthful, you're gonna have an emotional reaction to that because it's their kids. So that's also another like navigation point.
I think they're gonna teach it alongside of how, like with our generation in elementary school and junior high, we were always taught stay away from Wikipedia, do a .edu or a .org because it's more credible. I think it's gonna be the same situation. And alongside that, they're going to say, okay, but you have to make sure that it's credible, and those credible sources are few and far between. So, good luck.
And then, like, another point of pushback for that, too, will be parents that are like, well, like, liberal media and, like, the liberal ideas that exist within education and within things like that. So, because, like, I know, like, my father, when it comes to, like, .edu and .org sources, even though it's the government reporting them, it's like the FBI and revered sources within law enforcement reporting these statistics. Like, they're not always believable to these people because they have that association to the government or association to a college campus or any sort of liberal institution.
And I think, just to defend the media, since it is my major, really quick, like, I don't know, it's not your fault, or like it's not my fault if I'm gonna report something and I'm gonna be a good journalist, and maybe person A and B aren't. But it's not my fault if you can't decipher that and you can't understand what journalism or what media is being commodified for advertising. And they're just spewing one message. Like, you have to be able, like, obviously that's hurting journalism, but also we need to be more aware, like, what's true and what's not. Like, I don't know, obviously you're gonna watch what you want to watch, but you can't blame the media because that's the media you're watching.
And also, just like to tie that back into politics too, like, because there's so many people now that are like becoming more popularized, not figureheads but political figures that have no connection to politics or have never held a position of power or anything like that. So it's like At the same time, we're going to demonize news sources and anchors who report things or journalists who report things that are biased or whatever, but you also have people that you're elevating who are creating a lot of the nationwide talking points, who haven't had policy positions, who don't know how the political process works, who are just putting their opinions out there. But those opinions are going to be held as like widely believed, when in reality they're not grounded in any sort of policy or actual course for change.
So we could talk forever probably about this, and that was literally 2 questions, and we probably went 5 million different ways with each one. But if you're not Professor Murley or my mom and you happen to be watching this, I hope you maybe got some new perspective or something and you enjoyed it. And if not, thanks for watching. Thanks for talking with me. So
Of course. Loved it.
bye.
Bye.
To learn more about other social justice topics, click the WordPress link in the description for more of my content. Also, check out the links to the article and survey referenced in each question.